Welcome back to the Badass Literature Society, where badasses come together to rate and review novels recommended by you. Hi, I'm Michael.
This is Barbara.
And I'm Lauren.
This month, we read The Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. Stephen Graham Jones is a New York Times bestselling author of 35 or so novels and collections, and there's some novellas and comic books in there as well. Stephen has been an NEA recipient and has won the Texas Institute of Letters Award for Fiction, the Los Angeles Times Ray Bradbury Prize, the Mark Twain American Voice in Literature Award, the August Derleth British Fantasy Award for Best Horror Novel, the Independent Publishers Award for Multicultural Fiction, the Western Literature Association's Distinguished Achievement Award, the American Library Association's RUSA Award and Alex Award, the 2023 American Indian Festival of Words Writers Award, the Locus Award, 4 Bram Stoker Awards, 3 Shirley Jackson Awards, and 6 This Is Horror Awards. Stephen's also been inducted into the Texas Literary Hall of Fame. He's been a finalist for the World Fantasy Award and the Eisner Award, and he's made Bloody Disgusting's top 10 horror novels. He's the guy who wrote Mongrels, The Only Good Indians, My Heart is a Chainsaw, Earth Divers, I Was a Teenage Slasher, Killer on the Road, and this book we read, The Buffalo Hunter Hunter. Stephen lives in Boulder, Colorado. That was a mouthful of awards that this man has won.
Mm-hmm. Good for him.
Barbara, do you want to tell us a little bit about The Buffalo Hunter Hunter?
Yes, this was originally published on March 18th of 2025. It is considered a horror and... Did I say that? Horror and historical fiction. It is 435 pages, and it currently has a let's just round it up. A 4.1 on Goodreads, 4.2 on Amazon, and a 4.1 on Fable. It has not been nominated for or won any awards at the time of this recording. So we think it's important for readers to know what, if any, representation is in the books we read. So for this book, there are main and supporting BIPOC characters, no LGBTQ plus characters, and no characters with disabilities. Actually, there is one character with a disability.
Oh, yep, you're right. I forgot about that.
There we go.
All right. And then, Lauren, would you like to please read us the back of the book?
This chilling historical novel is set in the nascent days of the state of Montana, following a Blackfeet Indian named Goodstab as he haunts the fields of the Blackfeet Nation looking for justice. It begins when a diary written in 1912 by a Lutheran pastor is discovered within a wall in 2012. What is unveiled is a slow massacre, a nearly forgotten chain of events that goes back to 217 Blackfeet dead in the snow, told in the transcribed interviews with Goodstab, who shares the narrative of his peculiar and unnaturally long life over a series of confessional visits. This is an American Indian revenge story captured in the vivid voices of the time by one of the new masters of literary horror, Stephen Graham Jones.
And before we jump into our discussion, I do want to provide a quick trigger warning. Not that we're going to talk about all these things, but for this book, intense violence and gore, death, animal death and cruelty, rape and sexual assault, racism and colonialism, body horror, and some other traumatic topics like alcoholism, confinement, and suicidal ideation. Also for this book, I think it's important to understand the real history of what this fiction is based on, the real-life atrocities of the Marias Massacre. The Marias Massacre was one of the most tragic and senseless acts of violence in American history, the slaughter of nearly 200 Blackfeet people in what is now known as Bear Creek, Montana. U.S. troops under Major Eugene Baker's command attacked a sleeping camp and killed mostly women, children, the elderly, and the sick. Lieutenant Gus Stone, one of the company's commanders, later described it as the greatest slaughter of Indians ever made by U.S. troops. And that's what makes The Buffalo Hunter Hunter so powerful. Stephen Graham Jones isn't just telling a horror story. He's reviving history that has been sanitized, softened, and buried. So, moving on. What did you think of The Buffalo Hunter Hunter? And remember, no spoilers.
So I thought it was a bit hard to get into at the beginning, and like the writing style is very different than what I'm used to, as far as they're very long chapters and there's no breaks, and it's even hard to say chapters because like there are no chapters in the book. It's like characterized by who the character is talking, so it's first person, depending it's first person, and then we have 3 characters that we get their point of views of, and then the book is broken into like their point of view. So then you have like they have very distinct voices, so that's not an issue that I had. It's more so the length of the sections. On top of that, like it was a lengthy paragraph of how he writes. And so I was struggling a bit with that because sometimes I notice myself kind of getting disinterested if someone is going through long-winded discussions. And it's funny because like the two people I struggled reading their point of view were the two related um characters, the Etsy and Arthur. I don't know how you say their last name. Burakarn? Is that right?
It is.
You listen to it.
I know it's Bokarn.
Bokarn. So it's theirs, and it opens up with them. So you get hers first, and then his. So after we got into like Good Stab story, that's when I feel like the book really shined. I just had I struggled reading the other two because they were very like wordy in how they talked in the book and like to themselves, because it's a very internal monologue of a book type thing, because obviously, you know, it's anyways. But once I got into the story, I found it really fascinating to read, and I really enjoyed Good Stab's parts of the novels. Actually, I think his was my favorite, like hands down. I enjoyed reading about his story. Overall, I enjoyed it, but it did take me a second to really get into it. And then at the very, ooh, what would you say, Michael? Like third, one
So
third of
yeah,
the
the final third of the book.
like I literally stayed up like finishing this I read like whatever it is, like 3 hours towards the end or something like that. I stayed up reading that whole night just because I didn't want to put it down. I wanted to know what happened at the end. So I just think it took me a hot second to get used to the writing style, and I'm not even sure if it's the author's writing style or those two characters that I was just kind of like meh about. But yeah.
This was tricky. So I enjoyed the story. I found it hard to get into at times and hard to be excited about picking up and continuing until, like Barbara said, that I mean that the final third is the best part of the book probably. As far as the characters, I also agree with you that Good Stab's perspective was the most interesting. I think what I struggled with most with this one is the way that the story was told, because effectively, with the exception of a handful of chapters in modern time, it's effectively told through journal entries. So we're reading Arthur Bokarn's journal that he's written many years ago, about his life as a Lutheran pastor, and then we're reading Good Stab's sections of it are also entries that were written in the journal by Arthur that were transcribed after Good Stab came in and provided quote unquote like confessions to him. And so that's the style that the story is told. And for me personally, I found that style hard to get into. I thought it was an interesting way to tell a story, and I in that case that was interesting and fine. But it was also at times a little bit dry because of the way the story was being told. That's kind of where I was at there. I was really excited about this book, and I think maybe I went into it with higher expectations than I should have, and that led to some of the, I guess, frustration at times in the book, because like this book checked off a lot of boxes for me. Like I bought this book right when it came out. It's horror. It's takes place in the American Old West. It's a Native American story, which I think is really cool. It's a story of revenge and vengeance, which also checks boxes for me. But so I did like it, but I didn't love it, I guess would probably be the best way to summarize that. I did want to shout out the author, Stephen Graham Jones. I thought it was really cool, and I appreciated that he used the genuine language that the Blackfeet tribe would have used to describe these things through Good Stab's chapters. But that also was a struggle as someone who was listening to the audiobook, and I guess even Barbara who was reading it, sometimes to figure out what is he talking about exactly. And so I say that because I wanted to shout out also Greg Green, who I found his Substack, and he had a nice glossary of what all these terms meant, and I shared that with Barbara, and it was very helpful to understand some of the terms and better grasp what Good Stab was saying at times. So we're not going to go into our. Oh, sorry, Lauren,
Oh,
I
you're good.
almost left you out. Go ahead.
It's all right. I'm just, full disclosure, I'm just here for the vibes this time. I unfortunately did not get to finish the book because I kept falling asleep when I was listening to it, which doesn't mean that it was boring necessarily. My life is just chaos right now. What I did get to read, the first probably third of the book, I felt like I would agree with Barbara and Michael's analysis that it was slow to get into. And I don't know if it was so much the writing style or just the fact that I've never read anything like this before. Just like a really different, I don't know, way. And then I think for me too, with listening and not reading, and I guess maybe Barbara, did you read it, Barbara?
Yeah,
Okay.
I read it instead of listened to it. Yeah.
So like when they're changing characters, was it like obvious for like the book version? Because
No,
I felt like I had a really hard time with this particular way of writing, tracking
correct.
when they were switching narratives, and so like I'd have to then go back and be like, wait, who am I listening to?
Right.
And so yeah, between those two things, like I think I would have probably ultimately liked it if I got to finish it.
Right.
But I'm just here for vibes today because I
Yeah.
can't contribute too much. But
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, it's not broken down in chapters. It's literally like that person's point of view. So it's dates. So it's like July 5th of 2012 or something like that, and that's Etsy. And then obviously we go back to the 1800s, and it's Arthur and Good Stab, and their sections are broken down by dates, and then like I feel like a very tongue in cheek chapter name of like what their name is, and I can't remember off the top of my head what their each name is, but like the one of them is like the something of three bodies or something like that, and then
The absolution of three body.
yes, which is funny because this is an Arthur's point of view, so it's kind of, he's an interesting character to say, like the absolution of him. Okay, bro. Anyways.
Yeah, the
But
absolution of three persons and the Naxader's dark gospel.
yeah,
The
so
titles.
that shows you anything. But yeah, like I was a little confused when I was reading it at first. I was like, wait a second, did we just switch the point of view here? And I didn't catch that. Yeah, I was like, wait, because I'm one of those people, and I can admit it, I do not pay attention to chapter names or chapter numbers or anything like that. And so that's definitely something that is a problem that I need to fix, because if I'm just like reading, I'll just like read that and then my brain's like, wait, hold on, like this is a different person talking here, like you need to go back and figure that out. So that was a huge issue for me with this one, until I was like, okay, brain, focus, like we're switching here. And obviously between Good Stab and Arthur, it's very obvious because they talk differently. And like I said, like it is obvious whose point of view you're reading about, but like this is such a different novel and the way that he wrote it, and so I was not used to it. And so in the very beginning I was just like, what is happening? But once you get used to it, I think it's fine.
I'm glad it wasn't just me.
No, I think we all struggled in the beginning, at least I did. I know.
Yeah, no, I think we all struggled at the beginning. That was not just just you. That was a group experience. So as you know, we're not going to go into our individual ratings at this point in the podcast. Got to wait till the end for that. But our group score for this one was a 7.5 out of 10. So would you recommend this book? I think that I would, but I might give whoever I'm recommending it to some caveats that I wish I had known before getting into the book. And what I mean by that is just letting them know what the structure of the book looks like, so that they don't go in expecting something different, and they know it's going to be, you know, these journal entries, and it's going to be a little bit of a different read than a traditional horror book that they might read. But with that information, I think I still would recommend the book, because it is a really interesting story, and the history behind the horror and the supernatural elements is a really important story to be told. So I think I still would recommend the book.
I can't comment on my recommendation. As I said before, I think ultimately if I would have gotten to finish it, I would have probably liked it and recommended it. I think though it's pertinent to like our current, I don't know, political landscape of kind of softening history and like trying to erase the past. And so I think I would recommend it just on that alone, as far as like the dangers that can come from trying to do that and just make America look like we have always been super wonderful people when I feel like a lot of our history has been what's the word I'm thinking of, like sugar-coated or just, you know, rewritten to make it seem less brutal and awful, really. So I think just knowing that that's kind of what happens in this book, I think I'd recommend it just on that basis alone.
So I think it's a very important book to read, given the fact that, like Lauren mentioned, like, so obviously I wasn't born here, but I grew up here as far as like schooling and stuff, and I don't remember learning about this at all. I think it's interesting that this was even discussed. So I'd be curious to know if any schools are discussing what happened here, because this obviously happened, and just pretending and sweeping it under the rug isn't how we deal with this kind of stuff. And I think as a whole, America's a little bit bad at pretending that this stuff didn't happen to its history, you know? Like, you can't just have good things, you have bad things, and that's how you learn from that, and that's how you have empathy for others. So yeah, I think it's a very important thing to read. I would recommend this book. I think honestly everyone should be reading this so you get an idea what the heck happened. The thing that I would say was definitely pick up like what Michael suggested, that someone broke down the terms of what Good Stab is saying, because as someone who visually reads, I was struggling to picture it. It's mostly like the animals that I was struggling with. Like the other stuff I could pick up on what is the word we're looking for? Like cues,
Context clues.
Context clues from the passage. But for animals I was struggling. And so like I was picturing the wrong animal at times when I went back and read what they actually were. I was like, "Ooh, yeah, that is not what I pictured in my head." Except for like there was like a couple of animals that were very obvious like what he was talking about. It didn't detract in the sense of like I wasn't understanding the passage. It's just like I said, I'm a visual reader, and so when what I was picturing in my head was not what actually was happening. So I would be like, hey, like pick up this and this so you get context, so you know what you're reading, and then just realize I've never read a book by Stephen before, so I have no idea if all his books are like this, or if this is for this particular one, this is how this one is. I would be very interested to pick up something else of his and read more. So I just feel like I wasn't sure what I was getting into, so maybe I would have like be like, hey, you need to read this book, but here are little tips and tricks and stuff like that, and then that would maybe get that first part of the reading have a better experience, because I struggled, like I said in the beginning. And I know some people, if they don't like the book right off the bat, or if they're struggling in the very beginning, they'll put it down. I don't really like doing that, because I feel like you need to get a book. Well, I don't like not finishing a book regardless if I don't like it or not. I think there's only ever been one book that I DNF'd. Yeah, I think I would do that, but I find it very important for people to read.
So I will say, because I was also curious about what you just mentioned, Barbara. This at least I looked at a preview for Stephen's most popular book, The Only Good Indians, and it is more of a traditional novel. It's not written in this journal entry style. So that may just be this one that's written that way. All right. For those of you leaving us, don't forget to give us a rating if you like us, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Our handle in both places is @BadassLitPod. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got a book you want us to read, let us know. Now for a short preview of our next episode. Next month, we are reading A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This one was recommended to us by a listener named Pam. Thank you, Pam, for the recommendation. And Lauren, will you give us the brief synopses of what we've got coming up?
Deep in the stacks of Oxford's Bodleian Library, young scholar Diana Bishop unwittingly calls up a bewitched alchemical manuscript in the course of her research. Descended from an old and distinguished line of witches, Diana wants nothing to do with sorcery, so after a furtive glance and a few notes, she banishes the book to the stacks. But her discovery sets a fantastical underworld stirring, and a horde of demons, witches, and vampires soon descends upon the library. Diana has stumbled upon a coveted treasure lost for centuries, and she is the only creature who can break its spell. Debut novelist Deborah Harkness has crafted a mesmerizing and addictive read, equal parts history and magic, romance, and suspense. Diana is a bold heroine who meets her equal in vampire geneticist Matthew Claremont, and gradually warms up to him as their alliance deepens into an intimacy that violates age-old taboos. This smart, sophisticated story harks back to the novels of Anne Rice, but it is as contemporary and sensual as the Twilight series, with an extra serving of historical realism.
I would never put sensual and Twilight in the same.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
It got me until then. I was like, what?
So that's what we've got coming up next month. Remember, the second part of this episode is going to be an in-depth look at the Buffalo Hunter Hunter. So if you do want to read it, stop listening now and come back and listen to the rest when you are done. Nom Nom is fresh dog food made by real people who really care. They're purposeful and enthusiastic about giving your dog the best food for them and their health, so they can thrive and be their best. Nom Nom delivers fresh food made with whole ingredients backed by veterinary science. And science tells us that dog health starts in the bowl, so improving their diet is one of the best ways to help them live a long, happy life. All you have to do is order, pour, and serve. Barbara and I have 2 dogs, Luna, a husky, and Quinny, a Shih Tzu mix. Our 2 dogs love the beef mash recipe, but to be honest, I'd say Quinny's favorite is the turkey fare. She drools when that comes out of the fridge. Yes, I know, Luna. I'm going to tell them about that right now. Luna is an extremely picky eater and always has been. She usually takes forever to warm up to new food, but not with Nom Nom. She dove in immediately. Both dogs seemed to have more energy, and Luna's stools were no longer soft. Your dog's health starts in the gut. A better diet means softer coats, more energy, better breath, and smaller, more consistent stools. Your dog can't tell you if they're healthy, but you can tell when their health improves. It's the easiest way to take the guesswork out of feeding your dog the best. Nom Nom meals are pre-portioned for your dog's exact caloric needs. Board-certified vet nutritionists are kind of a big deal, and Nom Nom has 2 on staff that work extensively to ensure everything gets sent out is the very best for your dog's livelihood. So how does Nom Nom work? You tell them about your pup, age, breed, weight, allergies, and protein preferences. Then they tailor a specific amount of individually packaged Nom Nom meals and send them straight to you. Store the meals in the freezer or fridge until it's mealtime. They'll give you specific instructions on how to transition your dog from foods like kibble to always fresh Nom Nom for best results. Watch your dog clean their dishes, dance for dinner, and overall thrive. Ready to make the switch to fresh? Order Nom Nom today. Go to a link in the description of this episode and then use our referral code BADASSLIT. That's BADASSLIT and get 50% off your first order plus free shipping. Plus, Nom Nom comes with a money-back guarantee. If your dog's tail isn't wagging within 30 days, Nom Nom will refund your first order. No fillers, no nonsense, just Nom Nom. Now, for those of you sticking around for the spoilers, here we go. So like always, we'll start the second half of this podcast with the Badass Character Award. Barbara, who is your nominee?
So I feel like if you pick anyone else besides... So if we're only going from like the 3 main characters, Good Stab, obviously. But outside of that, there's some honorable mentions from people in Good Stab's story. Outside of that, no. So Good Stab.
I'm with you there. I think that Good Stab is really the only choice here. Lauren, do you have a nominee for the Badass Character Award?
I would concur with...
Congratulations, Good Stab. You are the winner of the Badass Character Award for this month. Now, before we get into our discussion questions, let's talk a little bit about the characters. In this case, the 3 main characters, or the 3 perspective characters we get. We'll start with Good Stab. Good Stab is a Blackfeet Native American who had a bit of a skirmish with what his tribe calls a catman, resulting in himself becoming an unkillable nascent. I thought it was interesting that they used the term Nakzader instead of vampire for this book. I had to look up Nakzader. I was not familiar with this term. I don't know if either of you two were, but it's very similar. It's from German folklore and literally translates to after consumer or night consumer. So it's someone who is believed to be able to drag the living after it into death by consuming their life force.
I feel like if you look into different cultures in their history, they have a quote unquote vampire in almost all the lores. They just don't call it a vampire. Like
Yeah.
vampire's the most commonly used nowadays term, but like beforehand, like this isn't like a new phenomenon of these types of creatures. Like every culture I feel like has one.
Very true. And I mean, I guess that's you made a really good point there because like his culture, his tribe called them Catmen or the Catman. That was because the Catman was also the same thing as Goodstab, just much older.
What we would call a vampire.
What we would call a vampire. Yes. Goodstab seeks out Arthur Beaucarn to confess, quote unquote, confess his sins. But as we know, history has a way of refusing to stay buried. And we'll get into some of that a little bit later, the history between Goodstab and Arthur and why he chose Arthur in particular to discuss these things with. Speaking of Arthur, Barbara, do you want to tell us a little bit about three persons?
I hated Arthur so bad. I'm so sorry. Maybe I'm supposed to.
I think you're
annoyed
kind of supposed to.
Even before I figured out what the heck he did. Like he just annoyed the crap out of me. Anyways, Arthur, or three persons, as Goodstab calls him, and is a Lutheran pastor
Correct,
in like a little town in Montana. Like it's like a fairly newish established town, I believe, right? Like
it's this is at a time where the West is being developed, so yeah, it is a very new rough and tumble town.
Yeah, and so like he's older, I think. Oh, what did we say? He was maybe 60s, 70s or something at the time that he's writing his little diary.
I would say that's probably right.
And he is a late pastor in the sense that he was not a pastor for a very long time. He decided to be one after, and you learn through his little passages after he did this unspeakable thing that he does not discuss, obviously, because he only puts himself in a good light in the diaries, and come to find out, what he did. So, and then anyway, so yeah, he became a pastor to kind of like redeem himself, I believe, for what he did. And then obviously I feel like my biases is showing every time I'm talking about this man. He attempts to preach to his little flock, as he calls them, like the killing is bad and blah blah, and he's a preacher essentially. So yeah. But everyone in town calls him other things, and he's very particular of what people call him, because like it's noted in his little diary that like people call him something else. I don't know. They call him like preacher or priest or anything but pastor, right? And then he like begrudgingly says in his diary, like, I don't correct him, but I want to. It's blah, 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 or something like that. No. And I was like, okay. But anyways, as you can tell, I was not a fan of him. Reading his sections annoyed the crap out of me, even from the beginning. Mind you.
I think that, so you mentioned like he gets angry when they call him like, father or priest or these other terms. And I think that that's because he holds respect and reverence for people with that title that he doesn't feel about himself. And he doesn't feel like he's deserving of.
I didn't get that vibes. I didn't get that vibes because like he literally talks about like how like people feed him and give him food, and he's like, oh, and like this cornbread or whatever is supposed to last me like 5 days, and he eats it all in one go. Yeah. Like he's like he preaches all this crap, and then obviously in closed quarters isn't doing any of that, and he's an alcoholic, and he has struggles with literally all the things. So he's an interesting character. He is not a good person. You get the vibes that he's obviously outwardly pretending that he is, but internally he's struggle busing with all these things, but he still won't ever admit it.
Yeah. He is an interesting character. That is accurate. Our final perspective character that we get, it's not as much as the other two, but it's Etsy Bocarn, Arthur's great 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 granddaughter. I
Quite
think
a
it's
few
four. It's
greats.
either four or five greats.
I thought it was more than that, but yeah.
Quite a ways down the line.
Mm-hmm.
But she's a communication and journalism professor who is trying to find a pathway to tenure, and thinks she's got her golden ticket when she gets a call that someone has found this journal that belonged to her ancestor. She thinks she's going to be able to, write a best-selling novel and get a book deal out of this thing. And so her experience, I guess, in a sense, the book is written so it opens up with her perspective, and then it's almost like as we're reading the journal entries, she's reading the journal entries. Is kind of how the story flows.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the book is her reading this document from 1912, authored by her. Oh, it's only three greats: great 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 grandfather, Lutheran preacher.
No,
Arthur
I'm pretty
Bocarn.
sure
I
it's
could have
more
sworn
than
it was
that.
four or
It's
five.
more than that, yeah.
It's a lot of greats.
Yeah. Because at one point she even jokes and said, "This is way too much to write. I'm just gonna call you great." More great.
And then there was one of her colleagues pointed out in like a comment she was able to unhide on her work that there's a French term apparently that describes it much. I can't remember the term, but I remember that part of the book. Anyway,
it was a student of hers, but yeah.
Yes. So those are our three main characters in this book. And now we'll jump into our discussion questions. So the first one, what were your initial expectations going into this novel, and how did it meet or defy those expectations?
So I had zero expectations. I actually was not looking forward to this novel because I don't like, how would you describe that?
Westerns, yeah.
Westerns. I don't like Westerns. If I had, so I guess when you guys were talking about it, or when Michael was bringing it up, I think as soon as he said Western, like I know I did. I just like didn't pay attention. I didn't realize it was the point of view of a Native American. Had I known,
I would
have
listened to everything that I said.
Right. I would have been more excited. But like I heard Western, I'm like, nah. I don't like cowboys. I don't like that era. I don't like reading about it because I feel like we glorify what they did, and they were terrible humans. If you ask me, that's just my opinion. But I've never been a fan of this genre, I guess I should say. So I had zero expectations, and yes, I struggled in the beginning, but I really enjoyed reading Goodstab's chapters. I feel like I understand why it's written the way it is. I absolutely hated reading. Arthur just reminded me of some pompous person who knew that he was not a good person and yet pretended that he was. And obviously it's done on purpose, but gosh, reading his chapters just made me like grit my teeth. Anyways, did the book meet or defy them? Yeah, obviously, because I had zero expectations for this book. I was not thinking I was going to enjoy it, and I find it ironic that I can't count Lauren because she didn't get to finish the book, but of the two of us, Michael was super excited, and I ended up, I think, liking it a lot more than he did at the end.
Yeah, I think that's true. I was expecting to like this book the most, and it is kind of funny that you, the one who was expecting to like it the least, enjoyed it more. So my initial expectations going into it were pretty high. I was really excited to read this. I was excited because I love Westerns. I love stories, real stories that involve Native American history that has so frequently been whitewashed and erased and sanitized. I was excited because I knew that Stephen Graham Jones was not only a Native American, but is a member of the Blackfeet Nation, which is the tribe that Goodstab belongs to in the story. And so in some ways it did meet my expectations because it was a very well-crafted story that was very interesting. I guess the only way it really defied it is the way that the story was told. That was the only thing I think that defied it and that I wasn't a huge fan of. But overall, I did enjoy the book, like I said earlier, and I think it mostly met those expectations that I had going into it. Lauren, do you have anything to add to this question?
No, I feel like I can't really answer it because I didn't finish it. I think
Fair.
I was, though, on the same mindset of Barbara going in, like, not like, just I've never read anything like that, and kind of didn't think that I would enjoy it, but TBD on whether I do when I get to finish it.
Moving on then. How do you perceive the character of Goodstab? What are his motivations and how do they drive the narrative? Good Stab is a really interesting character, and you get a lot of, I would say, more of his story than anybody else's. Like that, this is primarily Good Stab's story. It's, gosh, it's interesting. So I think that I perceived Good Stab throughout this story in different ways, and I think that that was intentional on the author's part. I think that for the majority of the book, his motivations are it's vengeance, absolutely revenge, for what the white man has done to his people, and in some situations, him specifically, his family. And I think that there are times when he acts and does things like, there are some scenes where he kills other Native Americans to feed. And I think in those scenes we're not meant to like him very much, and I definitely I didn't. And I think there are other scenes where he's getting to enact his vengeance, where it's if you like a good revenge story, this is a good revenge story, and those scenes are very exciting, and you're rooting for him in those situations. But overall, I think his motivation is primarily vengeance. I think there's an underlying, what's the word? Maybe like shame for who he is, in the sense of the vampire part of him, the fact that he was turned into this monster by the cat man. I think there's a lot of underlying shame that he struggles with there, and those were some of the most interesting portions of the book, when we kind of get these internal thoughts about him processing, like when he finds out, because in this lore, it's not like other vampire lore where, like, you just feed on whatever blood you can get and that sustains you. It's whatever blood you're feeding on, you begin to take on the physical characteristics of those people. So if he is primarily feeding on white men, then his skin will start to lighten and he'll start to look more like a white man. I think at one point in the story he mentioned that he had blonde hair. And if then he feeds on animals too, to try to do that. And if he feeds on animals too often, then he'll start to look like an animal.
Let's see here. How do I perceive the character of Good Stab? I feel like Good Stab is a character that is extremely well written because of how well rounded he is. I don't think the author wanted you to like or dislike, well, maybe dislike certain characters, but Good Stab is a great character because he is human and he is flawed and he has his good parts and he has his bad parts, and we see all of those, and you can see him even from the very first section of his part struggling with being what it means to be a quote unquote, as he called it, a good Native American, because he blames himself for what happened to him, because he shouldn't have killed the beaver for the pelt, because he wanted to buy things. He desired something, and he pretty much harkens to everything else that happened to him because of what he did there. And you can see him throughout all of his sections of the book, how he struggles with keeping true to himself while being something different, not being, the just Native American. Obviously, he turned into, I mean, he doesn't call it a vampire, but we are perceiving it as a vampire. And I found it extremely interesting. As far as his motivations, I think even Good Stab wasn't really sure what he was doing. Like, he wanted to die, couldn't die. And so then he's like, okay, so like, what am I going to live for? Let me then kill all these white men who are ruining the land by overhunting, by overdoing it, by killing, by doing all this stuff that they shouldn't be doing. And I feel like that still wasn't fulfilling him in the way that he expected it to. And so then he later on decides to get revenge on the soldiers who attacked that village, I guess, the village of Blackfeet, or
It
the
was like a
like a
camp,
town
like an
or a camp,
encampment
what
that
he
they had
called
set
them.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that is his motivation later on. And I think that part he finally, maybe, I don't even know if he ever found a reason for what he was doing, but I think maybe that one was what he settled on. As far as driving the narrative, it's the whole story. It's pretty much the whole story of,
Yeah. All right, our next question. Goodstab dubs Arthur as three persons upon their initial encounter. What might this signify beyond the concept of the Holy Trinity? And what is there to be said of Arthur's adoption of the name for himself as the journal entries progress?
I feel like it's a tongue-in-cheek thing from Goodstab. Arthur maybe perceived it as three persons because he thought like, oh, like he's this Native American who doesn't understand our religion and blah blah, but he knows like the concept of the Holy Trinity, and that's why he named me that. But I think for Goodstab, it was more of a not that. I don't know how else to say that. I think he meant more of like Arthur sees himself as like he has this persona of who he actually is, who he presents himself, and who he sees himself. Very three different things, I believe. And I think that's maybe at least that's what I understood. I could be completely wrong. I've never been great at analyzing it. I feel like other people do. But that's how I took it. And as far as him calling himself that, I mean, you start realizing that Arthur starts using some of the stuff that like Goodstab uses. Like he starts using like instead of calling it the sun, he calls it what Goodstab calls it, and I think there's a few other terms that he starts using it. I'm
Some of
not
the
really
terms for animals he started
yeah,
using too.
like I'm
Yeah.
not really sure. To be honest, I have no idea why he did that. I didn't quite understand that. Maybe I don't know. Honestly, I've no idea. I try not to get into Arthur's head. He bothered me. So.
Which probably surprises no one since we know that Barbara did not
Like
particularly
I'm
like
gonna just
Arthur.
the one thing I'm gonna mention is when I first started reading this book and we got to Arthur's point, I turned over to Michael and goes like, "Oh my god, I'm so tired of reading this white man's point of view." Like I was like, Stephen did a very good job of writing a white man. Is that
Yeah.
bad? Is that awful to say? Probably. I'm sorry. I'm sure like 90% of our readers are white men and they hate me. So here we go. Hate me even more, bitches.
So I think, and maybe I'm giving Goodstab too much credit, but I think that there was a deeper meaning to him calling him three persons beyond just the surface level Holy Trinity thing. So if you think about it, the one parallel that Goodstab and Arthur have is that they both have effectively lived three lives. So for Goodstab, like if he was known as Weasel Plume when he was a kid. He was an innocent kid. He was just living his best life. He got the name Goodstab because he stabbed and killed a crazy soldier when he was a teenager, and so they started calling him Goodstab. And for him, his third phase was becoming a vampire.
What did they called him? The full blood
Full
and
blood.
one who does not take scalps or something like
Yes.
that. Yeah.
I know it's like a cultural thing, but I just can't imagine going through like years of my life with my name and then like all of a sudden it changing. And then like having to get used to being known as something else and like I don't know, just like the logistics of that. I know it's like super common though culturally.
It is really common in Native American culture. A lot of times you have a name when you're a child and then you get your name when, it's determined like who you are. But anyway, so I think that Arthur I think he calls him three persons because of the same thing. Because even though Arthur doesn't know that Goodstab knows this about him at the beginning of their conversations, Goodstab knows that Arthur too has lived three lives. Arthur was a soldier in the Civil War when he was a teenager. Arthur was a witness and in some ways, what am I trying to say? An accomplice to the massacre of the Blackfeet people.
He was an accomplice. He's the one who did it. He didn't pull the trigger, but he sure as heck told them to.
He didn't stop anybody either. Yeah.
No, he literally told the guy, "Go
Yeah.
ahead and kill him.
Yeah.
Like kill this man. He has nothing to say." Like he's the spark that lit the fuse.
Right. So he's Civil War
Not
soldier,
an accomplice. He did it.
person present at the massacre, and it in like Barbara said, the spark that lit the fuse that caused the massacre to happen. And then the third phase of his life was being a pastor in Miles City, which is what he's doing at the point in the book where we get to near the whole book. He's a pastor. And so I think that maybe there's some symbolism there. That's why he calls him three persons, because he has that knowledge that Arthur doesn't know he has, but then Arthur was just going to assume he's talking about the Holy Trinity because we obviously know that there's three persons usually refers to that. As far as why he adopted the name, that's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that either. I was curious to know what you were gonna say.
I think that some of it, both the reason that he adopts this name that Goodstab gives him, and the reason that he starts to use some of the Native American terms for things. I think that as Arthur listens to Goodstab's story or hears his quote unquote confession, I think that we see Arthur start to feel some guilt and shame for his part in some of the things. And obviously, in the book, we see it like the internal monologue of that, but then we also see, near the end of the book that Arthur really felt no shame at all, or at least he says externally that he felt no shame at all, whether he did internally or not. The internal journal entries we get imply that he did begin to feel some shame, and I think that may be partly why he starts adopting some of these terms, because he feels bad for what he was a part of. The book then shows that he didn't feel bad enough to truly change, right? Because there's that scene where he has the big outburst about how you're just a savage, and all these other like racist terms he throws out about Native Americans. So, but I think that might be part of why he did that. I don't know. It's hard to say. Hard to know. 100%. Next question. What is the significance? And I will say, Lauren, if there's anything you want to jump in and talk about, just do that. Just jump in and talk. Is there
Thank
anything
you,
you'd like to
Larry.
comment on any of this that we've talked about so far, or are you?
Not so far, no.
Okay. Then we'll move on to my next question. What is the significance of having or not having a beard to Goodstab? It's a cultural thing for him. And there are certain, I can't remember the name of the people that had the beards. Do you remember, Barbara?
Native American tribe that had beards?
Yeah, the one was there's the tribe that he hated them, or the people that had the beards, but if he ate those people or fed from those people, then he would get one.
Right.
And
Well,
he thought he found himself disgusting when he had it.
I mean, I don't. You're asking someone who doesn't pay
Yeah,
attention to, like, I'm
fair.
really bad with names, to be honest with you.
So
So,
I guess the without, I could look it up and I'll see if I can figure it out while you're answering this question maybe. But there was a group of people that Goodstab did not like and found disgusting, and they had beards. And Goodstab learned when he fed on those people too much that he would then have a beard, and he found himself disgusting. So I think at the end it's a cultural thing. I think for Goodstab's tribe, it was facial hair was not something that they had. They had a clean shaven look. And I think that holds true even today in the Blackfeet Nation. Don't quote me on that, but from what I've looked into in my research, looking at that, so I think that's mainly it. I think that it's a cultural thing, and so when he initially thinks he can feed on these people that he finds disgusting and hates, and then when he learns that he's going to transform a little bit into them, then that becomes a whole problem, because then he has this beard that symbolizes this thing that he doesn't like. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, though, Barbara.
to mention this, I feel like, sure, it's a beer thing, but as a whole, as a society, we judge people by appearance. What you look like is what we're going to establish in our minds, whether that's good or not, who you are as a person. So if you outwardly look like this person, then that's what we're going to judge you based on you. And we also do that internally as well. Like, obviously, like I said, whether that's a good or a bad thing, that's up to interpretation. For Goodstab, when he learned that what he was feeding on transformed him to look like that, like what he looks like, how he identifies as a Blackfeet is what he looks like, what he's presenting himself. And it's what other people are going to look at him, because as soon as you look at them in that era, you knew what they were, whether they were like even like trappers, white men, soldiers, versus different tribes and different parts of Native Americans. So that was hugely important to him as someone who felt like he lost his identity because of what he had turned into. So his outwardly appearance and what he presented to other people was important, aka part of the beard. Like the Blackfeet did not have beards. He was not used to having a beard, and so to him that signified like the change in him as well. Like he wanted to be presented as what he was, what he saw himself, and what he is, a Blackfeet. So that's what I think. I don't know if that's right or not.
I know that's actually, I was going to say, I looked it up and you pretty much hit the nail on the head. So the Blackfeet tribe saw, and many other Native American tribes saw facial hair or having facial hair as being unclean. And so being clean shaven, or in their case, they plucked it but it was a sign of cleanliness, and they also thought that being clean shaven, that was more manly. So the men especially, it was very important for them to be clean shaven. So I think that played into that too. And like you said, his identity, obviously, that he already felt like he was losing. Let's see. Next question. Discuss the physical and emotional. This is a great one for Barbara to be answering first. Discuss the physical and emotional transformation of Arthur. How does his journey reflect the themes of identity?
Did he go through that? I mean, he went from thinking he did nothing wrong. Okay, I shouldn't be this rude to him. Okay, this man clearly was, as much as he hated to admit to himself, because he refused to admit to himself what he did kind of traumatize him. But like, I'm curious to know like what aspect of it traumatized him, because I feel like still at the end of it wasn't the fact that he killed these people. I think maybe it was the fact that they were maybe like women and children and not necessarily like Native Americans. I don't really know, because I feel like he still he felt guilty, but I'm not sure about what part, because I didn't get that from him of like him struggling with this. But like once he starts realizing what Goodstab is actually after, then he kind of gets really paranoid. And I think maybe at the very end, he finally realized, and I meant very end, when he gets turned into a...
You mean his other transformation?
Yeah, his other transformation. He gets turned into a prairie dog. I think maybe that's when maybe he finally realized what he did. But
he had a lot of time to think about it.
Yeah, he sure did. He sure did. Journey reflect the themes of identity. I mean, yeah, just like how Goodstab was struggling with his identity, I feel like Arthur was struggling, but in a different way. Like, he thought himself this great person, but like, I feel like if you were really to kind of like hold a gun against him and make him like actually admit to the fact, I feel like he knew that he wasn't. And that's why he was struggling with that. And he was a hypocrite. He was standing up to preach to his quote unquote little flocks of people and all this stuff. And I mean, Goodstab even has him admit it. Like, if you know murdering is bad, then why did you do it? And why was that okay? And now everything else isn't okay. Like, it's just, yeah, I don't know. He's a terrible human. I don't know.
So I think Arthur. So we just talked about in the last question how Goodstab struggled throughout the book with his sense of identity and who he was, and I think Arthur struggled with that also, but in different ways. Arthur wanted to be a good person, and I think he tried to do the things that he believed would make him a good person, but then he didn't feel like a good person. So he became a preacher, and he started doing this stuff, but I think internally, like Barbara just said, he felt like a hypocrite. So he's doing these things that he's trying to have him perceived as a good person, but none of it is working to actually change how he feels about himself. So there's that. And then I think there's obviously there's some PTSD from probably the violence he experienced in the Civil War, and then the violence that he experienced with the massacre of the Native Americans, and the violence he experiences on a day-to-day basis being someone living in a frontier town. So there's that aspect of it. There's also the fact that I think that he was at war in himself with feeling like the human emotions of guilt and shame for both the things that he had done and the things that he'd been a part of. So the violence against, like, the massacre of, historically, we know that the massacre that happened was primarily women, children, elderly, and sick people. Because they attacked a camp while the tribe had set up for their weakest to rest and recover, while the men went out and hunted. And so it was literally like they slaughtered innocent people, defenseless innocent people. And so I think there was this war within himself of feeling guilt and shame for what he had done, but then also dealing with this deep-seated thing that, or belief that I think he held, and in a lot of ways the U.S. government wanted people to hold, this hatred for Native Americans, and so there was this dichotomy in him of like the human emotions he was feeling of guilt and shame for doing these things to these people, but then his belief, that a deep-seated belief of racism and hatred about the Native Americans and thinking that they're less than a human. And I think that we saw a little bit of his internal struggle with that. And there were times in the book where the human emotions of guilt and shame were winning. And there were times in the book where the racism and hatred and prejudice were winning. And I think that some aspects of that made Arthur's story interesting because he was a very complicated, conflicted man who did a lot of horrible things and never really did atone for any of them. But it made his character feel human in that way. Like he wasn't perfect. He wasn't truly like pure evil either. He was some mix of things. And so those are my thoughts on Arthur's transformation throughout the story. Obviously, physical transformation, like Barbara mentioned at the end. When let me make sure there's not a question about that before I talk about it. And I don't think there is, so I'm going to talk about it here. So you find out much later that Goodstab doesn't kill Arthur. He turns him into a vampire and effectively locks him in a dark cellar or room and feeds him only prairie dogs, which after many, many years of only eating the blood of prairie dogs, turns Arthur into a massive prairie dog.
Okay, I love that.
Oh, this is what I'm telling you, Lauren. The last part of the book
That's
is
great.
So good.
That's
It's
great.
so good.
Yeah. So that he gave Arthur eternity to think about what he had done.
Sure did.
And be punished for it.
Loved to see it.
Anyway, the next question. How does the book address the concept of cultural identity, assimilation, and erasure? Obviously, these are pretty major themes of the book for both Goodstab and Arthur. We just talked about the idea of identity in the last question for Arthur. So Goodstab also throughout the book, and I think this was an interesting parallel that until I was writing these questions, I didn't necessarily pick up on as much, that both of these men were struggling with their identity in different ways. Arthur, like I just said, had this idea of who he wanted to be, couldn't ever attain it. Goodstab, at the beginning of the book, before he's turned into a vampire, I feel like Goodstab is who he wants to be. He's living the life he wants. He's with his tribe. He's doing what he wants. He's happy. He's living his best life. And then I think that when Goodstab's identity crisis comes in is after he gets changed, because no longer feels like he can be around his people, and so he feels like he's losing that identity. There are times in the book where he's physically losing his identity because of the things he feeds on make him look different than he normally does, and so you've got that aspect of it also. Obviously, there's an overarching theme of the book of talk that touches on like the American colonization effort to force the Native American people to assimilate to white American culture, and in that way, that's like they're lending to the erasure of their own culture and their own identity. And so there's all these different big melting pot things happening with both these individual men's identities, but also the larger cultural identity of like what are the micro is these men and their identities, right? And then you take a step back and like what is like this village, and what is the village's cultural identity? What are the Blackfeet Nation? What's their cultural identity going to be? What is America as a whole cultural identity going to be? And so there's all these layers, and I think that Stephen Graham Jones does a really good job at showing us the micro, but also zooming out enough so we get an idea of what's going on in the macro.
I think I am not smart enough to talk about stuff like this. I just have a lot of feelings about it. I don't even know if I could articulate it in the way it deserves to be talked about, to be honest with you. I mean, oh man, it's a powerful book about these things because you get to see Goodstab is a proud Blackfeet Native American, and it's sad to see him feel like he's losing that, and when he becomes a vampire or catman, whatever you want to call it, and then his struggle to trying to become that and still not lose that aspect of himself, because he mentions throughout the whole book like how people perceive him and how his own people perceive him, and how, I might be mistaken, but last I checked, like, they are very, like, core, like, you live and breathe, like, your tribe, you know, like, you don't go off by yourself type thing, like, and he's by himself, and you can see him struggling with that concept of having to do everything by himself, and having to not, or like not having, you know, his tribe to rely on, and his friends and his family. And he keeps mentioning, like, if only his dad and the people that were with his dad had told the people that had come on the boat, like, no, don't come here, leave type thing, instead of opening their arms to them and trading with them, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And how he's like, well, like, before, I think maybe it was even Arthur mentions, like, oh, well, you guys wanted our guns, and you wanted our pots and pans, and you wanted our iron, and you wanted this and this, and we gave that to you, and it's like, you should be grateful. And he's like, maybe we would have been better off had we not accepted all these things. But then he acknowledges to himself, which I believe Arthur never does, that, like, his own greed caused this, because he wanted a type of gun. He called it like I don't know. I thought it was a shotgun, but it wasn't.
It's a many shots gun.
Yeah.
He called it. It's a repeating rifle.
Right, and like that's he feels like his greed for wanting that, and why he killed beavers, which you weren't supposed to do, led to his downfall, essentially. And then as far as, like, the erasure, like, you can see that, like, he even mentions, like, these lands aren't yours to claim, like, that we never claimed the land as ours, we just, you know, benefit from it, and we're, like, living in harmony with the lands, whereas, like, these white men, these people are coming here and claiming them as, like, this is ours, and, like, who are you to do that? It's interesting to read. It's to see both of their point of views of what that means for cultural identity, assimilation, and erasure, because obviously Arthur doesn't see what they're doing as erasure. You know, they're like, oh, well, we did good things for you, you should be grateful. Yeah, like I said, I honestly don't even think I'm smart enough to talk about these types of stuff. It's just
I wholeheartly disagree with that. I think you just
well.
talked brilliantly about and shared your feelings about this question in a way that was very eloquent and well spoken. So
Thanks.
let's not talk down on ourselves.
Okay. Well, it's enjoyed reading that in this book, and I think that's the important part to get out of that.
That is true. I did want to touch on something real quick that Barbara mentioned, because it made me think of it when you talked about how, like, a big part of Good Stab's identity was being part of his tribe, part of his community, and he couldn't have that anymore. And I think that was one of the saddest scenes in the book. His isolation was almost, it was a self-imposed exile. His tribe actually wasn't, they didn't see him be like, go away. Like, they were okay with him. They understood, like, I don't think they fully understood what the Cap Men were, but they knew of this, like, you know, this legend and things like that. But it got to where Good Stab couldn't trust himself because he hurt someone in his tribe. And that's when he was like, I can't be around them anymore. And so that was really sad to have your community and your tribe, in his case, still want him, but him not be able to trust himself to be with them was really heartbreaking to read. Next question. Identify and discuss any symbols or recurring imagery in the book. What do they represent, and how does the author use imagery to enhance the storytelling?
These are the type of questions I struggle with. I don't know. I feel like if I actually, like, really thought about it, I could come up with stuff, but I don't. I guess, could you give me an example? Like, I guess I just don't. This is why I hated this part of, like, literature class, because I feel like I've always struggled with these types of questions, because I feel like the author writes the book, and obviously they have intentions in what they want us as readers to pick up on. But at the end of the day, what I read from the book and what I pick up on the book is going to be vastly different than what someone else picks up from the book and what they read. And like I said, there are intentions from the author to be like, okay, this means this and this means this. But, like, if we don't have a breakdown of what the author intends, I feel like everything else is up to interpretation. Like, I can sit here and write a little thing, and these teachers can harp on all of these things and what these people meant, and I'm just going to use like Shakespeare because he's like the most common one that people harp on, what he meant by all this. But like, what if he actually was just joking about fart noises? Like, we don't know. Like, truly, we really don't. So like, to sit here and feel like, oh, this is what this means, I struggle with that because I feel like it's so up in the air of like how I interpreted the book versus what you interpreted the book. And if we don't ask the author exactly what they meant by it, I feel like it's kind of a crapshoot. So maybe the author meant things by it. I'm not sure. I don't know. I feel like I'm not one of those people who picks up on that, I guess. Or is good enough to pick up on those things.
So you asked for an example, and the one that I will give you is Weasel Plume, the name that Good Stab was given as a child. Weasel Plume is a white buffalo calf, and I think that's
what that means, or you mean because
yes.
he named him that because he
That's
also named
why they named him that. And I think that the white buffalo calf being both a white buffalo and a calf symbolizes that it's the innocence, and the white part of purity, and then him transitioning and becoming Good Stab, leaving that innocence and leaving that that version of himself behind.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know how to answer this, honestly. I have no idea. I'm not smart to do this kind of stuff.
So you are smart.
You're not smart, Barbara. Stop.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't pick up on symbolism, I guess. I don't know.
So the only other one that I had that I wanted to talk about was also related to bison. So they called them the Blackhorns, and I think that the imagery there, we get a lot of scenes of the white settlers slaughtering the Blackhorn or the bison, and nearly
bisons were different than buffaloes. That's two different types. A bison is not a buffalo.
They are, but I think the Blackhorns were bison. I'd have to look at that guide that I sent you.
Gotcha.
But in that way, I think that the imagery of the bison or buffalo being slaughtered was symbolism for how not just the Blackfeet, but all Native American tribes in America felt at that point. They were also being, ravaged by violence that they didn't ask for and didn't deserve. And so I think there was some symbolism there too.
Is it like is the word analogy of like what they were actually doing to people as well?
Yeah.
Both. Yeah.
Yep. Did you have anything else to add there?
No, like I said, if like people bring it up, I'd be like, oh yeah, I definitely see that. But like coming up with stuff like that myself, I feel like I'm not good at that.
Fair. So moving on to our next question then, discuss Stephen Graham Jones's writing style and the implementation of 3 distinct voices. How does it contribute to the overall impact of the book? Our final question today, the term vampire is only used once in this book at the very, very end. How does the Buffalo Hunter Hunter differ from other vampire novels you may have read? How is it the same? And if you've read other books about similar themes or settings, how does this one stand out? I found that interesting. We talked about this a little bit earlier, that vampire isn't used really hardly at all until the very last chapter. And I think it's used by by Etsy, the modern descendant of the Bocarn family. It's very different than any vampire novel that I have ever read. Obviously, some of the overall ideas of vampires are similar, like the drinking of the blood and all that kind of stuff. But in this one, sunlight wasn't a problem. Some of the the tropes of like vampires' weaknesses and stuff aren't a problem. In fact, it seems like there are very few things that can kill catmen or the creatures in this book. And so in that way, I liked it. I always appreciate when someone takes a totally novel approach, at least novel for me, that I've never read. I like getting different perspectives, so it's not just the same, tired, vampire story or werewolf story, or pick a supernatural thing where it's always the same stuff and the same tropes and the same ways to kill them and the same things that they do. And so it was really interesting to have a very different take on that in this. And I think, and don't quote me on this officially, but I think that a lot of that is based on the real lore of these creatures in this tribe, as far as like the lore that they had and the legends that they had about these things. I mean, I've read a lot of books, I guess, with similar themes, but not similar settings. I don't think I've ever read a vampire story that took place in the Wild West, and that was kind of interesting. I would like to read more of that. I think that would be cool. This one definitely stands out though overall. Like it's very different, and it was a very well written story about vampires, and I appreciated that it was all based on, or at least a lot of it was based on, actual, legends and folk tales and lore from the Native American community that they're talking about in the book.
Yeah, I mean, I feel so if you come into this book thinking you're going to get a vampire story, like that's not the point of this novel at all, actually. It's just I feel like he wanted to add the supernatural aspect of it and like why this character could or what is the word?
Exact vengeance.
Yeah. And revenge and like how do I get this character to like live a long life type thing. So it's like, oh, we can bring the supernatural aspect of like why he is harder to kill. I absolutely loved the take on, and I'm just going to use the term vampire because it's much easier to use, or I guess Catman, but where most people are more familiar with the word vampire. So I absolutely loved this idea of the vampire because, like, if you really think about it, like, what they're drinking, like, why wouldn't that shape what you look like? Like, why wouldn't that transform you to look
Right?
like what you're drinking? Because, like, if
That
that's
was
the
such a
only
cool thing.
right, like if that's your only sustenance in the blood is what it's the cells of what makes us that, like it's such, and it's not like instantaneous either. Like he says, like it takes 4 years for him to look like this, or years for them to look like this and start looking like whatever they are feeding on. I gosh, that was such a cool concept to me when I read that. I was like, why hasn't anyone else thought of this? Like, it's so cool to
And I wanted
see
to
that.
ask you real quick,
Okay.
since you're talking about it right now, have you ever read a book with vampires where they did that before?
No.
No.
Nope.
Okay.
I did not. The only thing I've read is just like I'm trying to think. Like you can tell if whether they feed on human blood versus like animal blood. Like there's certain, like they're not as strong, or like maybe they're like their skin isn't like it's more like gaunt versus this. Or I think
Mhm.
I think it might even be Twilight is the one that like mentions like eye color or something like that, to where
Oh,
it
interesting. Okay.
changes depending on what they feed on. So that, but never to this extreme. So that,
Mhm.
like I find that very, very interesting. Really enjoy that concept. As far as like, so the sun does hurt them, but not in like it doesn't kill them. Like they can be out in the sun, they're just weak towards the sun, and like if he stares at any light source long enough, it literally blinds him. And
Right.
like he mentions how he's not stronger than anything because like him taking down a bear, like him punching the bear literally broke his arm, and he had to feed for the arm to heal. Like that's all very different because like most concepts of vampires, like they're stronger, faster, better senses and stuff like that of your common human or whatever. And I liked that in this book it was the fact that he was Native American and already had these skills of how to hunt well, how to use his other senses and not just his eyes to perceive
Mhm.
things. Like that wasn't what made him such a good hunter. It was the fact that he had all these skill sets already. It's just the fact that he could take a bullet and not die. It's the fact that he could get mauled by a bear and not die.
Mhm.
That's the difference. And I really liked the difference between Good Stab and then the Catman, of where he got his powers from, because we didn't even touch base on this. And I thought, honestly, the difference between Good Stab and the Catman were so much cooler of a link than Arthur, to be honest with you. Like you can see two people with the same, if we want to call it disease,
Mhm.
whatever you want to call it, the same issue that they have
Right.
and how different they approached it. Like I wanted to know more, like is the reason why the Catman that he encountered so much stronger, like he mentioned, is it because he had disregard to every human life, because he literally saw everyone outside of themselves being lesser than, you know, like is the reason why he's much stronger and can physically overpower Goodstab because he's just lived longer, or is it the fact that he feeds on people without like any regard to anything? Or, you know, like I don't know, it's just such an interesting concept, and the fact that the vampires here, like what you feed on also not only physically transforms you, but then you start also mentally taking these act like the way he defeats the Catman is such a cool and sad part of the story, because he knows like he can't overpower him no matter what he tries. And so the best way to do it is literally transform him into a barracuda, if I'm not mistaken, a type of like a fish essentially. And that's like the best thing, because like you only have other fish to feed. So regardless if he even has the concept of like, I need to get out of here, like how do you get out of here? Because you only have other fish to feed on. And if you pop out of the water, you're literally like, would that kill him? Like, would he cease to exist because he can't breathe the air? Like, it's so smart. It was such a smart idea from Goodstab, but like to get there, he had to give up the little girl that he was protecting, that he had this connection with, that was special. And like that's the whole story of him like telling Arthur about it. He was just like, this is like, of all the things like he regrets doing, that's his biggest regret, is having to sacrifice this child so this Catman can't destroy not only like his people but like everyone too, you know. And like it's just so interesting, the concept of how he turned this vampire into such a unique concept for the book. I really like that aspect. And the best part is, like I said, that's not even like the point of the story, really. Like it's not a vampire book, it just happens to have a vampire in it. I thought this was probably the most unique take I've ever seen on the vampire lore, because of all the different aspects of what that entails, of you feeding on creatures and that transforming you not only physically but like mentally. Like he mentions like he didn't want to lose what made him him if he fed on these creatures, you know? And the concept of like he didn't dream anymore, but then he would like sink his teeth into a bear and have the bear's dreams. And I thought that was so
That
interesting, like
was
that
really interesting.
concept, you know. And like whatever the bear is dreaming about, like he's dreaming about, but like he doesn't kill. Like it's just so interesting. The whole thing was such a great aspect of that lore, to be honest with you. So yeah, I don't know, I could like harp on what I found so fascinating by this, but like yeah, it's such a cool concept of how he did it. And yeah.
I agree, and I appreciate your thoughts. That was very insightful. Well, we've made it to the end of another episode. Let's talk about our scores. Barbara, what did you give this one?
Gave this an 8. Like I mentioned, I struggled in the beginning. I feel like at parts it was a bit boring, and honestly just Arthur's part was really boring to me. And I know why. If I actually admit it to myself, I really did not like reading his I understand we needed his chapters to understand him as a character, his motivations, how he perceives himself, how he perceives Native Americans. Like we needed all of this to establish, but I hated reading his, because it just read to me like this I think I'm better than others type of mentality. And I hate reading that. Like obviously I
No.
hate reading that. I hate seeing that, and I hated that, but it was needed for us to get the difference between like how he viewed the world versus how Goodstab saw
Yeah.
the world. And it's funny because like I feel like if you were to ask both of them like, are you a good person, Arthur would say yes and Goodstab would say no. And to me it's the complete opposite. Like
Yeah.
yes, Goodstab isn't a like, he made mistakes, he did that, but you can see like at the end of the day, like he admitted to his faults, and you could see how it broke him every time that he accidentally killed someone or had to feed from someone. And he has this dichotomy of like, I want to look like a Blackfeet, but for me to do that, I have to feed on Blackfeet. And he struggled with that concept. You know, like, I just really, yeah. And then, like I said, towards like the end of the novel, I couldn't put it down because I wanted to keep reading about like his relationship and like what turned him, like, why was he killing these, you know, these people that seemed so random, and then come to find out it's not random. He is getting revenge for what Arthur and all these other soldiers did to these innocent people, these innocent Blackfeet. And the concept of him murdering, like, not only these men, but everyone in the family, because, like, honestly, the concept of, like, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree or whatever that saying is, it's like, I feel like, and he watched them. I feel like he wasn't just murdering them to murder them. Like, I feel like he watched these family members and said, and judged, like, okay, these are your actions. You're not showing me that you've changed. You're not showing me that you're any different from these men who pulled the trigger or who said the words that happened. And then you get to the granddaughter, and he gives her a chance to prove her the difference, that, like, does this vicious cycle end with you? Do you realize what your great whatever grandfather did was terrible? Do you want to stop this? Do you, like, all these things? And he gave her that chance, and she proved to him, like, yeah, I can, you know, like, my it's so funny giving a cigarette to a prairie dog. You know, like, the thought of that cracked me up. But, like, it's such a serious scene, but, like, and it's funny because
that's so comical.
Right. Like, it's funny because I feel like at the end of the book, he's trying to be like, oh, like, he's still a man, and he has, like, men, like his eyes are sorrowful and all this stuff. And, like, maybe finally Arthur saw what he did was wrong, and he finally realized that, and he finally was okay with the fact that, like, yeah, you deserve to die. The scene of her, like, killing him was really disturbing because it's like his little head pops off and she, like, cuts it off with the saw, but, like, he's still squirming around, and it's creepy as F, and, like, she throws him off the ground, and, like, is that really gonna kill him? I don't know. It's just so interesting. Anyways, I really enjoyed reading this. I did struggle in the beginning, but, like, after finishing it, like, I was not disappointed I read it. I really enjoyed it. It took me a second. I feel like I had to, like, remove the concept of, like, these chapters are so long and there's no break. And for me, I'm, like, not used to this. Like, I just had to, like, throw that all out there and just, like, immerse myself in this novel and enjoy it for what it is and what it's telling me as a reader, and, like, the story and the imagery and all of these things. And, like, yes, I struggled reading Arthur's point of view, and that maybe is intentional, you know.
I think it was, yeah.
But I really enjoyed this book, and I'm excited to read more of his stories. So yeah, long-winded answer for my 8.
Well, that's good that you're excited, because I already bought one of his other books. So I gave it a 7, and I also really enjoyed the book. The only reason it got a little bit lower score from me was just the way that the story was told. It was not my favorite, but I still acknowledge that I really liked the story and I really liked the characters. And I think that Stephen Graham Jones is a fantastic author and storyteller. Just, again, me personally did not like the way that it was laid out, did not like the way that it was told through journal entries that were very long and in some cases hard to digest. I did want to comment on one thing you mentioned. You said that, like, if you asked Goodstab and Arthur, like, are you a good person, that Arthur would say yes and Goodstab would say no. And I think that makes the difference between them in that, like, being honest with yourself, right? Like, Goodstab doesn't see himself as a good person, and he would say no, even though some people might see some of the things that he does as being a good person. Whereas Arthur also doesn't see himself as a good person, but he would still say yes because he wants so badly for other people to see him as a good person. And I think he wants to be able to see himself, but he doesn't. And so it's just a lack of honesty with oneself.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is interesting.
Also, can I just mention the fact that at the very end we get this, like, Goodstab is finally back in his community, because, like, at the end of his chapter, like, we realize that what the Catman did was destroy his image with his own people. Like, they knew what he was, and they were gonna hunt him for, like, the things that the Catman did, but blamed on him. And, like, I feel like that was just such a devastating blow to him, because, like, yes, like Michael mentioned, like, he took him out of the community because he didn't trust himself with it, but they still saw him, like, they weren't scared of him, they weren't out hunting him. But then what the Catman did destroyed that whole image, and then they were out to get him, they were out to hunt him, and that just destroyed that. But at the end, I feel like we get a glimpse, like, he rode with them, he was there with them. And I just love to see that, because, like, this is not a happy book, but that kind of gave me, like, a happy ending for Good Stab, in the sense, like, he's still out there getting vengeance, and good for him, and, like, sticking it to the white man. But, like, he finally was part
the
of his
Catman was a
community. Right.
white man too, right?
Yeah, European is what I'm assuming.
Originally, yeah, he was European, yeah.
Because he came from the boat, and you know, yeah. So,
but then obviously,
like,
looked more Native American because he'd been.
Well, sure, like, he actually doesn't know what he actually looks like, but, like, how can you? Because if you can feed on whatever you want, and you're not feeding on what you originally look like, your concept of identity is non-existent. You know,
right? Yeah.
But, like, it made me happy to see that he was part of his people and his community again, because, like, I know how much that means, that meant to him. So
yeah, I agree. That was a nice little happy moment in an otherwise very unhappy book.
Yeah, gosh,
full of unhappy people.
when his little white buffalo, when the Catman killed him, though, oh my gosh,
I know, sad. When I read that, I was like, oh no. This would be the moment Barbara maybe cries because it's an animal.
I did. Just thinking about it makes me a little teary-eyed.
I can tell. So our group score for this one, like I said earlier, was a 7.5 out of 10. And we'll wrap it up now. Make sure you're following Badass Literature for free in your favorite podcast app, and make sure you're giving us a rating and leaving us a review if they allow you to. Super important for our podcast to get noticed, and also for us to get some feedback. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media. Our username on both Instagram, Facebook, and now Goodreads is @BadassLitPod.
Have feedback about today's episode? You can contact us by writing to badassliteraturesociety@gmail.com. You can also send us a DM or leave a comment on any of our social media handles.
As always, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. I'm Michael.
I'm Barbara.
Bye.